Now, because of what I just said, you can't really diagnose a personality disorder in a child. Because if you think about it, their brain is still kind of molding itself into what it's going to be when it grows up. It's not had enough experiences to have a full-blown personality disorder. So usually, childhood and adolescence is not the time to make a diagnosis of a personality disorder. Usually you wait till folks are older. And the other thing to keep in mind is personality, as we'll talk about with personality disorder here in a second, typically personality is fairly stable across your life, okay? The exception to that is if you get stressed. Sometimes people will sort of become more primitive in their personality. So the joke is, how men are all tough and, they're all tough and all this. Well, then he gets sick. What happens to a man? He gets real wimpy, doesn't he? He gets dependent, right? All the men are, there's not a lot of men in this audience, but, on the TV, the men are going to hate it. They'll turn it off right now, I'm sure. But they become more dependent, right? They kind of become a little more childlike. Oh, take care of me, I got a boo-boo, kind of thing. And they don't say that, you know what I mean? But all the women out there, you guys are laughing, you know what I'm talking about. So keep in mind that, like, when you're stressed, stress gets the better of all of us sometimes. So our personality is going to become a little bit more primitive and a little bit more, whatever that personality is, gets a little bit more primitive. So outside of that, it's a pretty stable thing. So when somebody says, do you know Mary Smith or whatever, people are going to have a certain idea in mind of who Mary Smith is, okay? Now again, I'm saying that she's not depressed or she's not anxious or there's not something else stressing her out, but on a baseline, this is who that person is, and that would be her personality, okay? So now, what is a personality disorder besides interfering with function? I mean, how would you know if it's a disorder? It's something that it's sort of their behavior and their inner experience that kind of clashes with their relationships and with their culture in general. So, and you'll see with some of these disorders that we're going to talk about how that comes into play. Usually, these personality disorders start in early adulthood or late adolescence. And they, like I said, they're kind of inflexible and remain fairly constant in the absence of depression or something else. And this personality disorder, usually it affects the way the person sees other people, sees themselves, and interacts with other folks. They tend to have a lot of trouble with emotion. Their emotions are much more on the surface. They kind of they change rapidly. They're not real steady. They're more intense, and the range of their emotions are broader. Okay. And like we talked about with impulse, a lot of these personality disorders have impulse. Folks have impulse control problems. They have a hard time stopping and thinking before they act. We talked about how you don't, as a psychiatrist, if somebody came in and they were depressed, I shouldn't probably make a diagnosis of a personality disorder because of what I just told you, that everybody sort of gets a little more primitive. Give you a concrete example. I had a 50-some-year-old woman who came in my office very depressed one day carrying a teddy bear. There's a type of personality disorder that you might associate with that right away, but I had to be careful because she was depressed. So once we got the depression treated, that kind of behavior went away, and it was not such a thing. It was just a comfort thing for her. So that gives you some idea, as to how childlike you can get when you get stressed out and depressed. So. A lot of these folks, because these disorders interfere with their function with other people, interaction with other people and all that, they cause them a lot of stress, and so there is a lot of depression and anxiety and other types of illnesses that go along with these personality disorders. Now, what kind of, any questions about, this is sort of general stuff, but now we're going to go into each individual type of personality disorder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover three that are kind of not real common, or folks probably wouldn't. You'll probably know somebody like this, but they're not as well known, I guess. And then I'm going to go into the more common ones, and I'm going to talk about, what I'll try to do is use a famous TV character. I had a friend of mine, Vicki Dalton, who's a psychologist, and she gave me some examples of folks that where she's seen on TV, characters on TV that play parts that have these different types of personality disorders, or at least they look that way. So it'll be something maybe you guys, if you know these shows and these characters, maybe you'll be able to say, well, I can kind of relate to that when you hear the symptoms that I talk about. So the first, the way we do this, and I'm not sure where this came from historically, but we sort of divvy these personality disorders up into three clusters. cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. Cluster A, the way I think of it is these are kind of eccentric folks. These are folks that kind of withdraw away from other people and don't want to be around others for different reasons. And I'll tell you, there's three of these. The first one is schizoid. Sounds like schizophrenia, but it's not actually. Schizoid is a person who doesn't have any other relationships, but doesn't really care to. They really don't miss social interaction at all. So it's not somebody who's socially anxious, not really anxious about people. They just don't care. They just as soon live as like, sort of like, I guess I think of a hermit or somebody who just withdraws, wants to live in the mountains all by themselves and not have any interaction with other people. So that's a schizoid. That's a schizoid personality disorder. They usually have a restricted range of emotion too. Their emotions aren't real. How do I describe that? I guess they're kind of flat. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's a little hard to describe. But another one is the second one of these cluster A personalities is paranoid personality disorder. That's just exactly what it sounds like. These are folks who sort of are suspicious of other people, don't trust them, kind of anybody. Right off the bat, they're kind of suspicious of other people. Now, it's not, we haven't talked about psychosis yet here and delusions too much. We have a little. But these aren't delusions that these folks have. So it's not like something odd like the FBI or like you might be from the FBI and you're spying on me and reading my thoughts right now. That's a delusion probably. These folks, it's more of a just don't trust you, kind of always looking over their shoulder, but it's not like they're having bizarre delusions about anything. So that's paranoid personality disorder. Maybe some of you guys know somebody like that. I mean, I think I've met folks like that before. They're always thinking, well, that's the government again. They're just very paranoid about stuff. The third one of cluster A, the third type, is called schizotypal. It sounds like schizoid, but schizotypal, and the way I think of schizotypal is this one sounds a little like schizophrenia and probably is a precursor of schizophrenia, or if not a precursor, it's probably like a lesser form, genetic type form of schizophrenia. So these folks may not have full-blown hallucinations and delusions like a schizophrenia person would have, a patient with schizophrenia would have, but they have some, they sort of have some odd behavior. They kind of keep to themselves, and something just isn't quite right. It's hard for you to put a finger on it, but when you interact with them, it's like there's some can't relate too well kind of thing. Some of these folks might go on to develop schizophrenia with enough stress in their lives, and some don't. They just have sort of this sub-threshold symptoms, Okay, so that's cluster A. That one, I want to cover that kind of quick because those are a little bit, a little more removed, I guess. Cluster B, these are folks that, in the cluster, like I said, the cluster A is kind of eccentric and keep to themselves. Cluster B, these are folks that are kind of dramatic and emotional and erratic, okay? There are four of these, and one is histrionic personality disorder. You probably heard of that. One is antisocial personality disorder. We talked about that a second ago. Another one is borderline personality disorder. And narcissistic personality disorder is the fourth one. Let's go into those one at a time, if you guys don't mind, and I'll give you some examples, okay? Has anybody ever seen the show Golden Girls? You remember that show? Remember Blanche? Okay, Blanche was probably histrionic, okay? Now keep Blanche in mind, and I'm going to go through some symptoms here, and you guys tell me if you agree, you think Blanche is histrionic. And if not, I'll just go back to Dr. Dalton and tell her, yeah, that wasn't a good example. No, I think you'll agree. These folks need to be the center of attention or they don't feel appreciated, okay? They tend to be dramatic, lively, flirtatious. Does this describe Blanche? They're always having to be the life of the party, and usually they are. And also, by the way, I should have said this in the beginning. I'm going to start talking about these different things, but you can't. Please don't use this to analyze your family or friends, okay? Because if you do that, I'm going to have a bad reputation. They're going to go home. They're going to go and use my name in vain and everything else, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm teaching you about this stuff, but don't go out and use it to analyze everybody, or I'm going to get in trouble.